The Intel Arc 580 has just launched, the B580 Battle Mage. It's an Arc GPU, Arc family. First was Alchemist, now there's Battle Mage, that's how that works. This is ASRock's Steel Legend, this version. And let me tell you, it is legendary, because this is the amazing 1440p graphics card, but with some notable enhancements from ASRock. Let's take a look. If you missed out on the launch of this card, you definitely should check out the launch coverage. And that GPU is the reference version from Intel. Intel just makes a few of those. They don't really make a ton of those in volume. They leave it up to other board partners like ASRock to come up with their own version, packaging it, because their expertise is in taking the GPU itself and building something around it. With the launch of the B580, Intel certainly hopes that they're appealing to gamers that want a deal on GPUs that can do 1080p and even 1440p gaming at 60 to 90 FPS and above, especially if you use upscaling technologies, in pretty much all modern AAA titles. That's actually really conservative. This GPU can beat 90 FPS in a lot of reasonable scenarios in AAA games. 12 gigs of VRAM. This one has its own ARGB header, as well as an LED on-off light switch, mounting holes for OEMs, which is nice. It's a triple fan flow-through design. The PCB is quite small, but this is a different PCB than what Intel uses with their design, because this is a dual 8-pin connection. This card also has a factory overclock from ASRock, the OC edition. And right on the box they tell you, you're going to need a 10th gen or a Ryzen 3000 series CPU to use this. You really need to use resized bar. If you don't, it can hurt the performance 50% or more depending on the game. It says PCI Express compliant motherboard with an X16 PCIe slot. Well, it only uses 8 lanes. You can get away with 8 lanes. You can run it on 4, but I really wouldn't recommend it. PCIe Gen 3 by 16 is also not fabulous with this card. You lose a little bit in some scenarios, but it's okay. We did our testing on a 10700K just to see what would happen, and it was reasonable. It's just, don't expect to get full performance. You get about 90 to 95%, give or take. 650 watt power supply is recommended, something with dual 8-pin connections. 8 gigs of memory is minimum, 16 is recommended. I'm going to go ahead and recommend 32. Windows 11, 64-bit or Windows 10. For additional details, go to intel.com/arc quick start. That is a good idea if you're thinking about using an Arc GPU. I generally, if you got something older than 10th gen, even Ryzen 3000, you might need to update your system. But as a $250 option, it is currently unmatched. And this is a really good version of this card. It is quieter, uses a little bit more power at idle, but it is quieter than the reference version from Intel, and it has better cooling. For the connections on this GPU, you have 3 DisplayPort and 1 HDMI. Interestingly, unlike the reference version of this card, there isn't one connector that is marked as the higher bandwidth DisplayPort 2.1 connection. They're all labeled the same. If you want to check out the B580 on Linux, be sure to check out our Linux video where we covered a lot of options. It's mostly okay. It's a pretty good card. It's not as good as it is on Windows. It needs a little bit more time to bake. That's still true as of this video. So with the overclock, how much faster is this than the stock reference B580? Well, it's going to depend on the game. In Shadow of the Tomb Raider, it's good for about 5 to 7 more FPS. With maybe 8% better, 1% lows. This is 1440p staying well over 60 FPS with the highest visual settings and the highest ray traced shadows setting. Now, ray tracing in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, they added it later. It was just a kind of a bolt-on, and it was because graphics cards of the era, only the very most expensive ones could do reasonable ray tracing. But with this is actually really good because Intel's pulled out a win here. Like, there's not really a lot of competing cards at $250. At the time that I'm doing this video, AMD and NVIDIA's new GPUs haven't launched yet. Things may change when they do launch, but as of right now, this card is performing like cards that cost $100 more. So there you go. If you're looking to do a build and you don't want to put in the absolute highest end CPU that you can get and, go all out, a $250 GPU with the rest of the build coming in sort of middle of the road, or the GPU is one of the more expensive components of the system, it's surprisingly capable. Even old favorites like Doom Eternal, ray tracing, 1440p, no upscaling technology can maintain over 100 FPS in most scenarios. I like testing around the Super Gore Nest, and there were a couple times I could get it to dip down into like 78 FPS for just a moment, but generally the frame time and frame pacing you can expect over 100 FPS. This display from ASRock is capable of 165 Hertz, and sometimes I like to set a target frame rate and go that route, because depending on the game, you can end up with better frame timing and frame pacing. But Doom Eternal is a little bit of an exception to the rule because the engine is so well built that you can just let it do whatever you want. And it's always a very smooth gameplay experience, especially when FreeSync is on with a display like this. So yeah, it gets it done. It gets it done well, and I can't believe that it only costs $250 for as well as, I mean, it's not, yes, a $500 or $700 graphics card is going to do better, but from where we've been for the last 3 or 4 years with $300 GPUs and on up, this sets a new bar for excellence, especially with ray tracing, because usually with the less expensive GPUs, you can't really expect to have usable ray tracing. But this is head and shoulders better ray tracing than we've seen, at least until you get into also doing upscaling technology. And I think there's even a little bit more room for Intel to stretch there. So like DLSS 3 from NVIDIA, don't get me wrong, is very good. And from the time that ray tracing technologies launched with older cards, I'm talking like 3060, 3070, it really didn't make a lot of visual fidelity difference in games. But more, I'm noticing that with DLSS and technologies like XeSS from Intel, that it does actually make a difference at the lower end. Like the 4070, not TI or Super or TI Super, which is crazy because there's like 17 different 4070 cards. With all of the modern 2025 drivers, yeah, okay, you can maybe do something interesting with ray tracing, but that's a 4070. This is a $250 card. Anyway, that's enough rambling for this one. This is a solid ARC Intel B580 card, a solid implementation of Intel's chipset, and it runs even cooler than Intel's, even in this case, because it's tiny and a little strange because of the way that it works, but it works well. All right, that's enough rambling. If you pick up one of these or you want to show off your ARC system with pictures or whatever, hit me up in the forum. I'm signing out, and I'll see you there.